It is Monday, December 20th. Carol and I are here with Dorothy McIver, who joined Greening Greenfield at the very beginning. She tells us she was actually with Tom Murphy and Sandy Thomas. And now we're going to ask her to recall what the beginning looked like to her and her role, why she joined, why she stuck around so long, and what she felt she contributed to it. So Dorothy, you may begin.
All right. Well, before Greening Greenfield, the first group, Greening Greenfield Energy Committee met. A lot of us had been worried about climate change for quite a long time because, we knew that things were changing, although it wasn't clear exactly to what degree at that point. But there were some gatherings that happened before Greening Greenfield formed. There were a couple of events in town in 2003 and 2004 that I remember going to at the Energy Park in 2003, and there was a workshop at the co-op in 2004, and so people were starting to think about maybe doing something here in town. And during the spring, I think in 2005, a small group of us met at the Energy Park or the farmers market, I'm not sure which, but it was outdoors, and I think it was in the spring. And we talked about creating an energy committee to address the fact that we had many town buildings that were in bad shape, needed a lot of work, they were using a lot of energy, and we thought it would be good to focus on some of them and see if we could figure out how to make them more energy efficient and reduce the use of fossil fuels in some of these old buildings. So I believe that the three of us that met were Sandy Thomas, myself, and Tom Murphy. I think there was another person with us. And we decided to become involved. And we started meeting in the fall of 2005 on Monday evenings. Our first meeting was on September 21st at the Nessie Building, Northeast Sustainable Energy Association. And we actually met 4 times before the end of that year. And we always started our meetings with a potluck. And we were a small group of people at first. And then sometimes we met twice a month. And I'm going to read a letter that Sandy Thomas sent out about the Greenfield Energy Committee that was sent out in June of 2006. And we had some new members respond at that time and join. Are you interested in promoting energy conservation and reducing our dependence on non-renewable energy sources? The Greenfield Energy Committee is a citizens group comprised of Greenfield residents who are invested in Greenfield becoming a green community. We meet the second Monday of each month at the Nessie offices at 50 Mile Street next to the Energy Park. We start with a potluck at 5:30 and we meet till around 7 or 7:30 at the latest. We welcome new members, ideas, and expertise in energy sustainability. Contact Sandy Thomas at this number for more info. So the first year, we were involved in starting to meet with town employees and check on specific town buildings. But we really didn't have much involvement at all with the mayor at this time, and things moved really slowly. I remember we were able to work with the library. We found that the library windows were very drafty and in very poor shape, and somehow there was some funding that was procured and they got some upgrades done to the library that made things a lot more efficient there at the time. So that was a success.
And was that the Hovey House? The library was there?
The current library.
Current library.
Our current library, the old building. So that was one of the projects that I remember that we did have success with. We also were looking at other buildings and talking to town employees, and there was the town hall. There was the old school administration building that was torn down. That's where the John Zahn Community Center is now, Senior Center.
The Davis Street School.
Davis Street, and that had a lot of problems, and it went on for years to talk about whether it was going to be fixed or torn down or what to do about it. But pretty much during that time, we didn't get a lot of response from the town administration, and we just met, and we met with different people in town. We had events. We also worked on an evacuation plan, and I remember that we met with someone, I don't know if it was Bob Strahan at the time, but we met and talked to the town. It was the year after Katrina.
Oh.
And so the concern was around what were we going to do in terms of that kind of an emergency. And that got written up, and I believe that was made available to the public. I'm not sure if it was in the paper at this point, but that was one of the things that I know Sandy and I worked on it, and maybe a couple of other people that first year. So anyway, that was let's see, I'm looking here. So in 2006, we were meeting at Nessie, and that was the year that all the mayors in the state came to Greenfield to meet, and the topic that year was that the issue that year was climate change. And so I remember that Mayor Forgy came to our meeting the month or the week or around the time that all these people were coming to town, and she had not been to any of our meetings. And that was at Nessie, and I think that's the time you were remembering, Carol, when we were sitting on the bench, when we were all outside. And at that time, the mayor signed the Mayor's Climate Protection Agreement, and that began the working relationship that the Greenfield Energy Committee had with the mayor. In 2007, more people joined our group. Some of them are still with the group now. And we became the Greening Greenfield Energy Committee. And later, we simply became Greening Greenfield. So as I said, many of these new members are with Greening Greenfield today, and some have left, and some of the original members were not part of this next group, and some of them dropped off. But we have a group of people now who have been together for quite some time. And so we've come a long ways since those early days. We now have a full-time director of energy and sustainability, Carol Collins. And we're a successful model of what a group of concerned citizens can accomplish. We've become one of the first green communities, I think, in the state. We were the first green community. And so this has been a long success story. And so during these years, I've been involved in many aspects of Greening Greenfield. Some projects happened in the schools. I've worked on all the forums. I've been involved with the Green Hero campaign. I worked on the Solarized Greenfield campaign. I've helped out at many workshops and events. I was on the film committee for a number of years. There were several different groups that met and were not part of Greening Greenfield, but attended just working on the films. And we showed films at the library. Then we were at the Y. We were at St. James. We were at First Congo. I think there was another place. But we've had many years of showing environmental films and documentaries.
Do you remember when that began?
That was probably the first year that we became the Greenfield Energy Committee. And it was Peter and Sandra, Peter Letson and Sandra, who...
So as the Energy Committee, you were already formed the films before Greening Greenfield Energy Committee.
That was not the first year. That was when we became the Greening Greenfield Energy Committee.
So the film coincided with becoming Greening Greenfield.
After Mayor Forgy got involved, Nancy Hazard got very involved in working with the town. She was one of the catalysts in helping move that along. And she got involved in the ICLEI Cities for Climate Protection program, and was very instrumental in helping to get that underway with the mayor.
And that's ICLEI, I-C-L-E-I.
I-C-L-E-I, Cities for Climate Protection program. And the mayor had set two important goals for 2050: keep 100% of our energy dollars in the region and cut climate change emissions by 80%. And we had a lot of workshops for homeowners to help them find money to do energy upgrades to their homes and explore the resources of the community. We applied for and got free energy audits of over 15 of the town's buildings, and a follow-up grant of $250,000 for energy upgrades. And this was the start of many energy upgrades to our municipal buildings, and they're saving us money every day. So in 2009, we started the 10% challenge, which a number of us were involved in. And that was our plan to encourage 10% of the residents and businesses to reduce their energy use by 10% at the end of 2010. And that was our first step as the ultimate goal of reducing climate change emissions 60% by 2050. We achieved that goal, and now we're continued to work on the next 10% of the households. At the summer of 2012, over 1,300 households joined. We became a green community that year.
2010?
Let's see, this was between 2010, yes. And 2010, Greenfield was the first group of towns in Massachusetts to be designated. So let's see.
I'd like to interject for a minute.
Sure.
You're the first person that I recall mentioning that you had developed an evacuation plan, and that was after Katrina.
Mm-hmm.
I was wondering if that plan was used during Irene. It's the first I've learned of it before a major
I
event
imagine
here.
that some of it was. Irene was, what year was Irene? That was 2000, trying to remember.
I don't remember the year that Irene. I just remember that it was before 2014. I would think it was somewhere around 2010 or 11.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of people have mentioned that as being a major event.
Yes.
It wasn't expected to go inland like it did.
I imagine it was. I know that the plan involved other towns as well, and I think that's evolved in terms of how things are happening now and what we're doing with other towns and who the players are. And
so it was a cooperative effort.
So I think that it was. And then we also, another event we had was that ice event, which I don't remember when that happened either, where a lot of the towns, particularly the hill towns, were devastated.
The forests were devastated.
Yeah, the forests were devastated. People didn't have heat in many of these towns, and there were community centers set up everywhere. So that was one aspect, was that different towns would have a plan for how to where they would bring people if they couldn't be in their homes. And
I have an observation, maybe that might help, that Katrina
mm-hmm.
was designated as a hurricane.
Right.
But the next one wasn't.
No.
It was only designated a tropical storm.
Right.
Irene?
Irene, and so it didn't have the emergency response that could have used that plan.
No, it was very different. I was in Vermont when that happened. I was at Farm and Wilderness for a gathering.
Oh my goodness.
And we left that Sunday, all of us who finished with this conference, and a friend and I drove back. She was going to Maine and I was coming back here. And it hit the next day. And the people that were left at the farm who had to take care of the animals and were closing the place down and getting ready to leave, they were stranded there for weeks. They could not leave.
Could not leave.
And fortunately, they still had quite a bit of food there, and they had animals and chickens and eggs and a garden, and so they were able to survive there. But there were people that were totally stranded. If we had been a day later, there would have been 100 and something odd people stuck there with not enough food, and we would not have been able to get out.
So how did this? How was this reflected in the organization of Greening Greenfield?
This event?
Just as it historically moved from Katrina to something local.
I think it's made us, still ongoing, think about, what the implications are of all of this. I know I was involved in another forum, I don't remember the year, but this was particularly also related to a Vermont Yankee, because that became a big concern with the emissions and if there was a meltdown. And I know that was held at the Greenfield Middle School auditorium, and I'm not sure what year.
Was that a workshop or was that a forum?
This was a public presentation. The Mayor William Martin was one of the speakers, Bob Strahan, Bob Berry from MEMA, Nicole Zapko was Department of Public Health, Tracy Rogers from FERCOG. We had a medic vet expert in radiation emergency. and I'm sorry I don't remember the year of this, but it was in the spring. And
It was an event that was organized by Greening Greenfield?
well, no, it was, some of us were in Greening Greenfield, but we had created a group called Citizens for Emergency Preparedness at that
Okay,
time.
that reflects back on the emergency
And
preparedness.
Sandra Boston and I were the contact people for this, and it was on the flyer here. And so people came, and there were a lot of questions, and of course this was before Vermont Yankee closed. And there was a lot of concern during that time about closing that reactor down. So that was another aspect of this was, and I can't remember what year Fukushima was, if that had happened already, but it might have.
2000 and...
I don't remember.
Yeah.
Not too long after Katrina.
It may have.
2007? We can look that up
that
and
may have been
clarify it later. What we found that's interesting is that many of the longtime people in Greening Greenfield have had very strong interest in auxiliary issues that very much were part of Greening Greenfield's mission statement. And they would bring these into the group, and there was a weaving into the community, back to the group, from the group into the community. So you, in what I'm hearing, were kind of a steady member of Greening Greenfield before it became that. It was the Greenfield Energy Committee, and then the Greening Greenfield Energy Committee. And I guess I want to hear what you feel was, and you did a lot with evacuation, which we haven't heard a lot from other people, and you've done the New England Yankee. I was not
Vermont
here at the
Yankee.
time. Vermont Yankee was a big
Right, and of course there was
issue for
another
you.
group that a lot of us were part of that was specifically focused on that.
So there was splintering off, but there was
Right.
always a cross-pollination
Right.
and
Oh,
always
yeah.
a cross
Yes.
interests, so that you partnered with many different people at many different times.
Yes.
So I'm hearing two things that took your, I dislike the use of this word, but it does seem to say it the best, your passions about the changing environment. Can you think of other things that you particularly strove to make sure they were highlighted in Greening Greenfield's activities that were personal to you?
Well, of course, all the ways that the workshops and all of the programs that we did with people starting around the 10% challenge of coming up with ideas and suggestions of how people could save energy themselves, even though they had no control over what our government was doing and what the town could do, and we were getting money and we were starting to do things, but what individual people could do. So that was, and we were at the Green Fair every year at the fairgrounds and the different places that happened, and had handouts for people.
That's a good point. There was a Green Fair.
There was a Green Fair, and it started, the first one I think was, well, I don't remember, but it was back before we were Greening Greenfield. I think it was the year before.
Interesting.
Yes. And who was it that organized it? Sorry.
You know, it wasn't Greening Greenfield, but it was at.
Well, the Greenfield Energy Committee
we
was
were part
headed
of
by
it.
Tom Murphy,
We were part of it. Right.
who told us that yes, it was the birth of Greening Greenfield.
Right.
So we have by having Tom as our first speaker, he said I was always interested in energy, so he would have been at the leadership of that particular group.
He was.
So it wouldn't be surprising that it was. There seemed to be projects that Greening Greenfield developed that are all in. Nobody really takes it, sort of grows out of the group, and no one says this is my idea and I'm going to spearhead it, although that is a factor in Greening Greenfield. More often than not, it kind of just blooms from the conversation, and suddenly you have a project and you have an all-in project. So perhaps the Green Fair was, I'm just making leaps here, but from what I'm hearing people say, this, can you tell us more about the origins of the Green Fair and how your involvement might have...
Well, I'm remembering the first one. It was in the spring. It was a very warm day, and I remember particularly that there was a lot set up for kids that year, in particular, and in different ways, and other groups had exhibits there too. But we had information, and we had it was a fun day.
Uh-huh.
So it was set up to make learning about things that people could do interactive and fun. And particularly there were things for kids. So, and I think...
Was that when they built the houses, the doll houses and the wind? Or did that come later fairs?
I don't think that
Those
was...
are the science expos.
That's the science, yeah, you're
Okay.
thinking of
Science
that's a whole
expo.
different
Okay.
thing. But the Green Fair evolved, and I think, trying to remember here. Well, you were involved too,
Yes,
Carolyn.
I'm trying to remember. Was it the Council of Governments that held it, or was it the Chamber of Commerce?
Well, it might have been the Chamber of Commerce too, but it was at the fairgrounds,
Yes,
and
it
then
was the
and then it
fairgrounds.
moved to the Dome, didn't it?
Yes, it did 1 year.
1 year it was at the Dome. It kind of evolved around in different places while it was happening, and a lot of different groups came.
What is the Dome?
The hockey rink up off of Berniston Road.
Berniston Road. Is it still there?
Yes.
Okay.
You can buy it if you want.
Yeah, I don't think
So
it's
it's
being
no
used
longer
now.
functional, but it was a place where
Yeah.
you could have large events
Right, you
like
could
fairs.
you could be inside,
Interesting.
and I think we were there because of weather a couple of years. It was,
Yeah.
but so the weather didn't always cooperate, but it was in the spring, and many groups came and set up, and so there were businesses that came, and of course
Okay.
they had raffles, and they were hoping to sell products and have people, and so it wasn't just us. It was
So that was the fair where, when I became involved in 2015,
Mhm.
we were up at the fairgrounds and we had two series of workshops. One was energy
Mhm.
and one was gardening.
Right. Yes,
Yeah.
we
Okay,
and
so
we
that's the Green Fair.
Right, but in the early day, in the first year or two, we didn't hold workshops.
Yeah.
That came later. Then we got more evolved with what we were
Uh-huh.
doing, and had more opportunities to share different things that we were doing
Uh-huh.
ourselves. So that was an ongoing thing that started out of this early years.
Yes.
I don't know, when was the last one? A couple of years ago?
I think
maybe?
about 2017 or 18. It was
18.
at the technical high school,
At the tech school, right?
and
Yeah.
it cost more.
Right.
It became part of the newspapers of the counties. It was both Hampshire and
Mhm.
the Recorder and others were charging a different amount for advertising,
Right.
and it became more commercial.
Yeah.
And I think Greening Greenfield made the decision
Right.
the following year that we had a wonderful electric car exhibit at that one,
Right.
but we didn't feel that it had the same participation nor that it was worth
Mhm.
continuing. But Greening Greenfield had gone on to other mechanisms for
Mhm.
engaging people at the time.
Yeah.
What I like about our conversation is that Carol always has something historical, but I can bring in a few of the more current and up-to-date things.
Uh-huh.
Good.
Yeah.
Again, I ask you, what was your passion that you look back and you say, if there's one thing in Greening Greenfield that kept me there all these years, and I would still put my energy into?
Well, I don't know that it was just one thing.
Okay.
I enjoyed the years that I was involved with the film committee.
Uh-huh.
I think, we had a really wide range of different films covering a lot of different topics, and
Uh-huh.
I think there was a hope that we would attract more people. We had a following of people, but it tended often to be a lot of the same people that would come out to our films, and so we had a following of people, but we didn't have a way at the time. We weren't getting the films out any other way either. So,
What do you mean by getting them
well,
out?
we didn't have a way of putting them online where people could sign up later or something. We weren't doing
Okay.
the Zoom technology then, but you came to the film. And there were other groups that started out. There was another group doing films before we did, in Shelburne Falls, I believe, and they had a series of films that covered a lot of things, not just energy, but human rights and a lot of other aspects of issues that we were concerned about. So when we started, ours was not the first film series in the area, but it's been going on for years now, and I'm not sure if we're doing one this year or not. I don't think we
No news.
talked about it specifically, but
No.
yeah.
COVID has changed things substantially.
COVID has changed everything. I know,
Yeah.
it's been very,
Yeah.
it's very different now. You know, one thing I thought was good that we did, and we're still doing, are our forums.
Okay.
And I tried to find information on some of the old, I had flyers for a long time. I don't have any of that information anymore.
Okay.
But I know the first one was on food, and we had another one at one time that was focused on food, and particularly how to get, we had a presenter who had written a cookbook for low-income people.
Yes.
And that got distributed around to all the social service agencies and to people in the county who might not have known how to use some of the ingredients. And so that was good. We had one that focused on food and transportation, particularly, you know, transportation in the rural areas. Of course, this year our housing forum.
Yes.
Which and housing is an issue that, you know, we're all involved in still, a lot of us,
Right.
and moving forward with, because that's a huge problem here. So I think they've been very important. We held them at at the community college at GCC for many years until COVID. So this was our first year doing it online. And it went on for a long time because when it turned out we couldn't have it in person, then with many, many more months of planning and having to do our workshops in different months. And,
Okay.
and so it was
It actually stretched 10 weeks, I believe.
yes, so it was a
Weekly events.
very different experience. But a lot more people actually got to participate.
Yes.
Because before, if you went to a workshop, you had a choice. You might get to 2 in a day, and you had to make a choice.
Yeah.
This time you could see all of them. So so that's one thing about having COVID and Zoom, is that people are able to reach a lot more people
Yeah.
in a different way. So I think there is this definitely a concern here now in our whole area about housing. That really people are getting that we have to do something about that. And so and I think also our collaborations with other groups have become more frequent, like with Racial Justice Rising and collaborating on some films. And let's see, what other groups are we working with? I'm trying to think here.
Just Roots.
Just Roots. And then we were very involved in the formation of Just Roots. A lot of us in Greening Greenfield were involved in the whole process around the town farm and what was going to be happening, and with getting that off the ground.
Can you tell us more about some of the specifics of where that originated and who was involved and any of the steps you may recall?
I just remember we had, what year? I don't know what year it was, but it was not too long after we were underway that we started having meetings, and it wasn't just Greening Greenfield, but a lot of us were involved in it. And there were concerns about different parts of the area where the town farm is that the town was using at the time, and what would be available and how it was all going to work. And again, I don't remember all of the details now, but it was a process that went on for quite a while. But once it got established that this was the site that they were going to be able to do it, and they actually were able to have use of that building there for a while.
Do you know what the site is and how they chose it?
Well, it was the town. It was started
It's the town farm.
It was the town farm, the town poor farm.
The poor farm.
It was the poor farm,
right?
It was
right.
the poor farm.
And it was started by someone named Justin Root.
Ah.
And I remember Howard did a lot of research on this at the time.
Interesting.
And so Justin Root was back in, I guess, in the 1800s. I don't have.
And the building that's currently there, wasn't it, the apartments?
Right.
That was the farm where
people stayed, yeah.
Indigent were housed.
Yes.
Yes.
And I think it also became a senior housing place or some kind of facility at one point.
Yes.
And then, so it had been used to house people
so
before
the
this.
farm was already in existence, but it didn't sound like it was
the farm
ongoing.
Well, the
successful.
farmland was owned by Greenfield,
Right.
town of Greenfield,
Okay.
but it wasn't
farm?
The town wasn't farming it.
No,
so
there was no farm there.
Oh, okay.
It leased the land to farmers who used
Oh,
it.
And-
okay.
Who used it up. Soil was awful.
Yeah.
Oh.
And the original, there was a community garden that started there because, of course, the Pleasant Street Community Garden was still in existence when this happened, but there was a second community garden
Okay.
that started at Just Roots that was on a different part of the land that you came into from a different entrance before the main entrance.
Right on the river.
On the river, and we had a plot there. We had a plot at the community garden. We were always gardening at our house, but we had started having people stealing a lot of food at the community garden, and we lost some stuff that year, and we decided, well, maybe we'll move out here. And
At Pleasant Street, and
Yeah.
decided to move out by what is now Just Roots.
so we moved to the Just Roots community
And
garden.
who was we?
Well, a number of people just
From the community garden?
They formed a community garden.
Okay.
Yeah.
This is before the actual farm on the other side got started.
And
It
were
was still
some of
being-
those people Greening Greenfield people at
Yes.
the time?
Yes,
Okay.
yeah. And then at the same time, there was the farm itself was with staffing and all of that was getting underway finally and where the farm is now.
And where did that effort come from? That they
Well-
were staffing? That means somebody might have been paying a manager or something.
Well, it started after everything got worked out with the town that it could happen there. And this
Oh.
was Mayor Martin.
So it was
Uh,
town property, they
it was town.
negotiated with the town.
In one of our earlier interviews, someone said something about what convinced Mayor Martin it was a good idea. There was something that happened that convinced Mayor Martin this can work.
Mhm.
I can't remember what it was.
Oh, we'll have to go searching through while
Well,
we read this.
yeah, there was, and boy, because I think he was resistant.
Yes, he was at first. He didn't
was.
understand.
He didn't, and boy,
But thank goodness
I don't
something
know.
convinced him it was a good idea.
yeah.
And I don't know whether it was a person or an action or what. So
But
anyway, it happened.
But anyway, it took off, and it started small, and then every year there would be more and more things happening there.
Picking up stones.
The picking up stones part at
That's
first.
a whole community of
That was a whole
Wow,
community event. I
wow,
remember
that's cool.
Wisty Warbacher was out with the tractor riding around.
I could see that, yes.
And people came and gathered stones and.
So is it a contained area? It was like this many acres the town owned and it's still this many acres?
Yes.
Or has there been any expansion, or is there no room for expansion?
Well, I think things have expanded continually. I mean, the pollinator garden that Nancy is involved in.
I would say the amount of land hasn't expanded,
No,
but
but
the
the-
amount of
but
cultivated
the cultivating
land.
is expanded.
So
Yes,
it's
that's
been
what I'm
growing
saying.
as a farm and
Right.
people have
Yeah.
joined the group.
Right.
And it's become a business now of community farming to offer people with less opportunity to get good fresh
Right.
food to be able to afford
Right,
fresh
and the
food.
community garden part moved from across the river. It's no longer where it was before. It's now there on the main site. And so there is a community garden there that people are involved in that's separate from the actual farm operation.
Oh, so the community garden is what drew the attention to the place because
Yeah.
Well, that was part of it, yeah. But it was also the idea to have a farm.
simultaneously
Yeah.
with the community garden
Yeah.
starting up there,
Yeah.
simultaneously decided this is something that we got to talk the town
Right,
into.
because there was all this other land, and there were things that had to be, I think, worked out with the DPW because they had a lot of stuff stored there, and
Oh, okay.
were
They still-
using it,
they still do.
and they still do, but they
Yeah.
evidently cleared out some things, and now, of course, we're not using the building anymore, I guess, at this point, but the house,
Oh, the house?
yeah, is things changed there, and
I don't know.
anyway, I'm not quite sure how that's all working now, but they are expanding every year, and then, as I said, Nancy and folks created the pollinator garden this year, which I finally got to see this fall.
Nice.
And
Yeah.
I think this year they planted their first tree nursery.
That's right.
The tree
That's
nursery.
Right, the tree nursery.
And they have pigs and chickens, I believe.
Wow.
Yeah. Uh,
So they keep growing. each
so
year.
it's yeah. So that was even though it wasn't just all Greening Greenfield people, there were a lot of us involved in that, and it was a process.
Yeah.
And so that was very exciting to have that happen. And And then we have this farm now that's doing so many great things, distributing food and taking food into the city now and into Springfield. And
Really?
I believe they are now, that they've got a vehicle and that they're expanding, but they go to Oak Courts and different places and distribute food. And so it's become quite the operation. And
so you've done just about everything in Greening Greenfield, from emergency preparedness to bringing possibilities for behavior change to the citizens to be more energy efficient, to educating through workshops, to preparing films to show, to gardening and helping to promote just roots, and for participating in the massive effort of biannual forums. Oh my goodness. You began at the very table with Sandy Thomas and Tom Murphy. When did you actually move to Greenfield?
1993.
Oh, so just at the cusp of all of this activity, you came in right about that time. It was around 1992 or 93 that the idea for the energy park originated, if I remember from Sandy's presentation.
Yeah, do you remember what year?
And it took 5 years for them to get the money. It was 1997 or 8 when they got the money. And then they drew the plans. They got an intern to develop the plans for the park from UMass. And then they they wanted to do a replica of the train station, and that's when Tom Murphy was brought on board as the head of Kiwanis, and his knowledge of building and energy, and he got together the Kiwanis volunteers and they built that station from scratch.
What year did they open up?
They opened up in 2003.
You have it in your head.
Well, 2003 was the year in my date book I found the first events were happening there.
Yeah.
So it was definitely open in 2003. I didn't go back before.
Yeah, Sandy's presentation is the development of Miles Street. Is it Miles?
Miles Street, yeah.
Yes.
And she went into the energy park evolution, and we just picked up because we wanted to have the origins of Greening Greenfield, and Tom Murphy was the
Maybe you could tell us, Dorothy, about you were so involved in this, and you were still working full time.
I was working full time. Yeah, it was it was kind of a crazy time. I was also up until 2004. I was taking care of my mom and going back and forth to Maine. And Howard had his accident in =99, and I was caretaking him for a while, and I had to take time off from work.
Wow, what we could do when we were in our 40s
and I was looking at when I was looking at these old date books and seeing all these meetings and different things I was going to, I'm like, and I was working full time. How did I have the energy to do all this? Because now I don't.
Right. Happens to us all.
Boy.
What did you enjoy the most?
In the past, or in general, or?
We've talked about various portions of Greening Greenfield activities. Where did you get your source of satisfaction from?
Well, I think it's being involved with other people who share similar beliefs and goals and desires for change and wanting to make things happen, and
so working with others.
I mean, and that's true for other groups I'm involved in as well. It's like, you can't do this can't do it on your own. And there's something about having that commitment and that community of people who.
And it seems that for the various groups that we've identified today, is that there were a fair number of the same people in each group.
Right. But we also brought in a lot of different people for different things we were doing.
For special
events. We had committees that weren't just all Greening Greenfield people. There were people that were on the film committee, like Molly was on the committee when I was on it for a long time, and Bill, what was his name?
Which Bill?
He also did projectioning for a while too. I'm having one of those
yes.
moments, you know who I mean. But we had people who would just work on certain projects.
So that's Molly Chambers, who
yeah.
I know as being the lead in the Interfaith Council at, I confuse it, I think of that as
All Souls?
All Souls
Church.
Racial Justice Film Festival. I've
Yes.
gone to that, and
Yes.
she's been at the table. I'm
Right.
thinking
Yes.
she's a driving force of that. So
Yeah.
did she do that before the film
I think
committee
she was
with
doing
Greening
that. I think
Greenfield,
she
or
was doing. I think that had been going on already. And then she was on the film committee. Yeah, we've had different people on the film committee all along who only went to film committee meetings, and that's all they did.
Yes.
And we had the same thing with many other events we did.
But they joined, if there was a leader, they joined up
Yeah.
and supported.
They
that
supported,
event.
yeah.
Yeah.
And that was true. What was that event Sandra did? That was the
Turtle Island.
Turtle Island. There were a lot of people that got involved in that were not regular Greening Greenfield members and didn't become involved, but they were involved in special projects that we would do.
Right,
and,
right.
There were people that only pretty much worked in the schools, and sometimes came to meetings. So Whiskey and Judy were very involved in the schools for like Chris Walter, I believe, was. Or she was on the committee for a while.
She had a few things to do with the civic database. I see her work footprint in that.
Chris Walter?
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah. And of course she's got her rain barrels. That
Yes, she does.
Now.
She created her own business with that.
And so people have been involved in all different aspects. A number of people were involved in the Friends of Wasatinawa and the Nolan Beaker Project. There have been people that have crossed over and done.
The Nolan Beaker Project is.
That's the group that's been meeting for years around the history of the area of native people that lived here. Howard was a co-founder of Friends of Wasatinawa and the Nolan Beaker Project. So that's a different area, but there's people who have been involved in that as well, and
a lot of cross-pollination,
right.
if I may be so glib, with the pollinator committee. Dorothea and David Rule just gave a presentation to the youth group at the middle school.
Right.
Did you get to hear that?
I did. I'm very special.
Is that filmed?
No, it's not. They don't film. I guess there's a thing about filming it. Okay. Sorry about that, Dorothy, but it does come to the end of our interview. I think we were dwindling on ideas, but before we leave, I want you to give some parting words, and if it takes us somewhere else, that's okay.
Well, I've just been thinking about a couple of things, getting back to this emergency preparedness. I know we've talked about this. Now we have to be prepared for migrations, and with climate change and the long-term piece that we may not be around to see, most of us, but I'm very concerned now about the lack of, intensive money and energy that's being put into climate change, so that we're just not doing enough worldwide. Our government certainly isn't, and it's getting more dire, and we're not really taking it seriously and doing what we need to do. I mean, I'm very upset that I'm still having to use oil. I mean, that's the heating source I have, and and we're not in a position to do anything about it. And we get some fuel assistance, but there's no fuel assistance money to make transitions and
away from oil.
Away from oil. I mean, they have put in heating pumps at Elm Terrace. They don't have solar, but they have done that. But thinking of going to senior housing, I mean, that's going to be the same situation at the Weldon. They're still on fossil fuels, and and many people are doing things, but people that don't have the money, or people that are trying to find housing. I mean, there's so many people that are not able to do much of anything. And we do what we can in our house, but that's something we have no control over. And at this point. And there are many people in that position, but there's money, but it's all going to the military. And that's what's so maddening, is that billions and billions and trillions of dollars are going into the military.
Which is paying some for us to use more fossil fuels.
And the military uses more fossil fuels than anybody. And
So the concern continues and
so
heightens.
the concern continues, and it's getting.
What role do you see Greening Greenfield playing in the future as we pass the standard?
Well, I think we have to find people to pass the standard too, and we are an aging group, and we're mostly older women, and we need some new energy, and maybe it won't be Greening Greenfield, maybe it'll be a whole new group of people who will form, and there are young people who are already meeting in groups and doing things, so. Who's to say? I don't know what's going to happen with Greening Greenfield, but if we don't get younger people, it will be shifting into other areas with other people.
I think that's probably a good assessment.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I guess we're all committed to continuing while we're here.
Nice.
It seems.
Yeah.
So what would your parting words be for this oral history?
Well, I think we need to be. We've done a lot. I think we have in our own community and in our area, we've really been able to make a lot of changes, and particularly with Greenfield and our energy uses with the town, and all the things that have happened here. Certainly many other people have been involved too, but we have helped bring a lot of changes to our community, and they're good things. And I have to just keep hoping that things will continue to happen in a positive way, and that maybe there'll be some changes globally that will make a difference.
Well, I want to thank you for your time.
Well, thank you for doing this.
Thank you very much.
I'm glad you could come over.